And what does it have to do with? Well, it has to do with position sizing. Okay, now why do we care about the position sizing? I know a lot of people say, well, it's proper money management to know your position sizing. Well, it goes much more than that. There's much more that has to be taken into consideration just because of money management. So let's go into detail and talk about some of the insights into position size. And one of the reasons why it's so important is that too many traders are undercapitalized. I know a lot of traders, regardless of the market, are trading with too small amounts of money. I mean, if you want to trade and hold positions overnight, regardless of what market, you should have an adequate amount of money. If you're trading the large currency pairs, the large lots, we feel you should have anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000. If you're trading the mini lots, well then $2,000 to $5,000 or $2,000 to $10,000. But many people will be trading with $500 because they've been told on some site that they can trade for $100 to $200. You need at least $2,000 to $3,000 to begin trading if you're trading the mini lots, and to $20,000 to $50,000 if you're trading the large units. Now, it's wrong to use discretion when you're deciding on your position size, okay? It's absolutely wrong. But this is probably the way 99% of all traders trade. They'll get an idea for a trade, or say they're in a chat room and someone suggests something, or they want to go long the British pound and the Australian dollar. And so they, boy, I'm going to buy 5 lots. You know, this is a great idea. And you just decide on how many lots or what your position size is at the very last moment. Why? Because you're using discretion. Or say you wake up and you feel real lucky and confident today, so you say you're gonna bet the house. Or you say you feel terrible and not so confident, you had a bad day, you keep your position size very low. Even though you've had a string of winners, you're just very scared that it's going to run out. Okay, you're using discretion, and this is not the way to decide on your position size. Once again, I know this firsthand because this is the way I used to trade. I'd have a great day, and I would bet the farm the next day because I thought, well, my luck's going to keep going. And I would have a terrible day, and I'd keep everything small. Or maybe I would bet the farm again so I could make it all back. So it was all a discretionary move. We want to take that component out of our position size. What we want to do is use a simple mathematical formula. This is the RPS. But remember, this must be used prior to every trade. So even if you get an idea about what you want to do, you can't pull the trigger until you calculate this RPS method. Why? Because it automatically decides how many shares or lots you're going to trade. Okay? If you're trading stocks, it'll tell you how many shares. If you're trading futures or the currency pairs, it'll tell you how many lots to trade. And so you'll know exactly going into the trade how much you should or should not be trading with. Remember, the specialist edge is by adding structure to your trading, you take the guesswork out of position size. And so this method, really what it basically does in a nutshell is it takes the guesswork out because we're adding structure, okay? By adding structure, what we mean is we're taking discretion out of the picture. All right, here's what you want to do. The first thing you want to do, as we said, we want to start out with an adequate amount of capital. We went over the parameters. What we feel, in our opinion, is the right amount of capital that you should have in order to trade. All right. Now, what you want to do is you want to risk only 2% of that trade, okay, on any trade. So in other words, let's say you have $10,000 to trade with. That's what you have in your account. 2% of that roughly is $200. So that's the most you will risk on any trade, 200%, as long as your account is roughly around $10,000. If it's less, if you only have $5,000, well, you only risk roughly 1%, $100. If you have $20,000, you'll risk roughly about $400. But that's the golden rule, 2%. Now I know a lot of traders will trade 5, even 10%. Some traders trade less than that, trade with only 1% of their capital. I know I personally use roughly about 1% most of the time. Okay, so some traders use even less than that. It's up to you, but the benchmark would be 2%. So if you're trading roughly within the count that you know is honest, that's your real amount of money you can work with per trade, you only want to risk 2% of that. That's per trade. Okay. Now, conservative traders will include slippage or the spread included in that. So this is something you want to take into account as well. But just keep it around 2%, especially if you're just starting out. If you really feel you must go over that in order to trade it, I would say no more than 3, but that's really stretching it. If you're just a beginner or you've only been trading for a short amount of time, keep it at 2%. 1 would be even better. All right, so how do we apply the RPS? Okay, this is what we're going to be getting into today. This is what I want to make sure that everyone understands. So I just want to make sure No one is asking questions. Remember, if you have any questions, just wait till the very end and I'll go over everything again with you. But how do we apply this method? All right, so I'll go over the rules with you, and you can write these down. I believe this presentation is being recorded by FX Street, so if you want to, you can see them about getting a recording of this particular presentation so that you can study it a little bit better. Here is the position sizing formula for the Forex markets. Rule number 1 is you want to determine the 2% risk amount of your capital. Remember, we just went over that right now. So if you have a $10,000 amount, you're roughly going to be risking $200. That's your 2%. Now you have to decide on stop placement. In other words, you have to know prior to going into the trade where you will be stopped out if you're wrong. Right? Too many traders go into a trade thinking that they're absolutely going to be right. Okay? How many times have you thought, oh my goodness, this is a great trade. This is where I'm getting out if I make money. But what about where you're going to get out if you lose money? Because, there's odds are you may lose on the trade. So you must know in advance where your stop is going to be and how much you will lose if you get stopped out with a loss. Now, this could be a recent low or a recent high, depending on what side of the trade you're on. Now, rule number 3 is if you're stopped out, what would be the total dollar amount lost per contract? So in other words, if you lose so many pips, what does that transfer over into a dollar amount per contract or per lot? Okay? Not if you were trading 5 or 10 units or if you're trading just one, but always figure it out just for per contract or per lot, what would be the dollar amount that you lost? Now what you want to do is for rule number 4 is you divide your 2% dollar risk, let's say that was $200, by the amount of the total stopped out dollar loss, okay? And I'll show you this in a lot of detail with a lot of graphs, so this will be a lot easier to understand. It won't be so wordy. But once you divide your 2% by the dollar loss, this will give you the size amount. So you'll round off to the nearest number for the proper position size. And it's that simple. Now, I know a lot of you may be saying, boy, I've got to do this before every trade. Sometimes I'll get a trade or an idea right after a news announcement comes out. Steve, how can I figure this out? Well, trust me, I've been doing this for some time, and we have students at Specialist Trading that have been trading for only a week or two that have figured out how to use this, and it can apply it, you just, without the aid of a calculator, can figure it out in their head in roughly about 10 seconds. So it's not that hard. With a little practice, you can do it and put it together very simply. All right, let's put together and see what this formula looks like, just abbreviated form. Remember, it's the RPS formula. R equals the 2% risk amount of your capital. P equals the pip dollar loss if you're stopped out, okay? And then lastly, S equals the size or number of lots to trade. So what we want to do is divide R by P, and this will give us S, or the size or the number of lots to trade. It's that simple, okay? Now let's put some actual numbers to this so we can figure this out on our own. Let's say, just to make things easy, we have a 100% hypothetical account. Okay, I know most of you probably don't have that. I don't have a $100,000 Forex account, so don't worry. But let's just say we have a $100,000 account to work with. All right? Now we are only going to risk 2%. That's all we're going to risk, 2%. So what is 2% of $100,000? R equals the 2% risk dollar amount of our capital. So that comes out to $2,000. So that means if we lose on that, any trade where our account is roughly $100,000, we can only lose $2,000 or less. We will never lose more than 2%, which at this time is $2,000. All right, now we figure out what P is. P is the pip dollar loss if we were stopped out. Well, in this particular trade, we had a 100 pip stop loss. So if we got stopped out, we would lose 100 pips. Now, what does that transfer over into dollars? Well, in this particular case, let's just say it transferred over into $1,000. All right, so P equals 1,000. So what we do is we divide R, which is 2,000, by P, which is 1,000. And 1,000 goes into 2,000 two times. So that is the number we can trade with. That's our lot. We can two contracts, two futures share lots, and that's it. That's what we can trade, two currency pair lots. You see how simple that is? Rather than say, well, boy, I have 100,000 to work with, I'm going to buy 10, or I'm going to sell 10 or 20. I have so much money I can use. That's not the way it works. You figure this out, put the RPS method together, and we'll tell you and automatically decide for you. Now, you see, this will change as your account size changes, as your risk parameters change as well. Your account size The size may be much smaller, and your risk may be maybe 0.5% or maybe 1%. So this will all change. Now, as your account size grows and your risk parameters change, this number will change as well.